Yes, so I say delighted. Welcome back. I'm delighted to be joined by Mahyar Tousi, who is a very prominent conservative YouTuber. In fact, I'm pretty sure the biggest conservative YouTuber in the UK. I think you've got 180,000 subscribers now, and obviously you also do radio stuff and broadcast stuff. I mean, I guess the obvious place to start is when did you decide I'd start making videos about politics?
So it was about two and a half years ago. I think the whole thing started with it was unintentional. My background is Persian. I'm from Iran. I was born there. I came here as a kid. One day I found out that the Iranian embassy and the Iranian government had now banned me from going to Iran. It's not like I was going to go there, but I just made a random video on Facebook on my personal page, just ranting about that. And then my friends were like, that went slightly viral. And then like people were like, oh, do more videos, do more videos. I'm like, okay. So I started doing videos about capitalism, socialism, the usual stuff. It didn't really go well. But then when Theresa May failed to deliver Brexit back, last March, back in 2018, I realized that there's a disconnect between the mainstream media and people out there. They're not really giving the news properly to people, and so I just randomly decided to obviously do my research and provide the Brexit news and everything else on YouTube to people who can't get their news from the mainstream media because it's all spin and it's all obviously from certain angles, and it just went from there. So I obviously owe my success to Theresa May, basically.
At least you saved one job. So, so it was essentially the kind of the bias of the broadcast media. Because I saw quite recently the outgoing BBC Director General. Even he admitted that BBC did I mean, it was slightly implicit, but even he admitted that BBC did a terrible job representing Brexiteers. I mean, do you think that was what kind of provided you with an opening? The fact that the broadcast media really didn't represent the general public?
Yeah, I think because for decades and decades, well, especially the last couple of decades, the media and also the political establishment have been so complacent because they've been controlling it, and the agenda was always the same. Nobody was complaining. Ordinary people, the silent majority weren't saying anything. They were just silent. And then when the Brexit stuff happened and everything else since then in America with Trump, and nowadays, the silent majority is no longer silent, so they're now struggling. The status quo, which was for them. One of the reasons that they're biased and they do what they do is it's not really planned. It's just hardwired because they might have diversity of skin color and gender in BBC, but they don't have diversity of thought or intellectual kind of prowess. They're all the same. They all talk the same. They all went to the same sort of universities and schools. So now they're being challenged, and they're not really equipped with either evolving or actually admitting that they've been wrong all this time. So it's basically too late for them, and this is why we need the new media. And my slogan on my channel is that we are the media now. So
I mean, do you think the new media is a sign of politics being more democratized? And it's so much easier now for people like yourselves to challenge the more established players.
Yes, definitely, it's great. It's bringing more democracy into the media, at least, and it's making it easier to get closer to the kind of the political power. But I mean, we saw it's a bad example, but during the daily briefings during the lockdown with the government actually started to have some independent bloggers and the Lad Bible to ask questions. I mean, that's technically a good sign. I know it's Lad Bible, no one really cares, but but that's still a good sign that there was a time when we're talking about like decades ago and a century ago when first we only had just the press and newspapers, but access to information and access to power was very limited. So now anyone with a phone and Twitter and a blog post can technically make a change. I mean, we just saw what happened with Nigel Farage recently when he decided to go to Dover and he started to like report things on his phone, and he's not really a registered journalist. He's no longer a politician. He's just a civilian, obviously with a big name, but with limited power, he actually is making a change.
Yeah. I mean, before the last general election, so, I mean, was there a period where you really thought Brexit might not happen? This might actually get overturned?
No. I think it got to a point where I know everybody was like freaking out, but because it got so heated and the whole debate it basically crossed the line. All sides have crossed the line. It was impossible. Like, I mean, not impossible. It was, I mean, feasible. They could have stopped it, but logically speaking, I was never going to be able to see a scenario where Brexit wasn't happening, because I'm like, wait, the consequences will be chaotic. Like, no, I'm not just talking about the riots and stuff. I'm talking about like the reputation of the country. On the international stage, nobody would take us seriously anymore and say, well, you just had the referendum, you spent 2-3 years trying to leave something, you can't even get that done. So I was one of the few who, on using my channel on YouTube, trying to keep everyone sane and spread some positivity, because everybody was so angry and impatient. So I was like, guys, calm down, it's fine, it's gonna happen.
It's really interesting that you mentioned democracy, because one argument I heard so many times in Brexiteers is, it's not just about Brexit now; it's about democracy itself.
Yep.
Democracy is almost under attack. And you hear the same argument from kind of Scottish unionists, which is, the SNP are trying to overturn not just one but two referendums. I mean, were you kind of surprised by just how aggressive the opposition became and the kind of refusal to accept the 2016 result, and in Scotland's case, well, Sturgeon's case, 2014 result?
I mean, with the SNP stuff, it's interesting, because I mean, just like any other campaign group or any sort of left-wing movement, they don't actually. Their intention is something else, and they don't really tell you the truth. And so don't be surprised if there's another referendum. They're going to obviously overturn it, and they're just using people, taking advantage of people. So I don't know. It's difficult to tell what's going to happen, basically.
Yeah. I mean, but with the Brexit referendum, I mean, presumably you're now pretty confident it can't be overturned, because if we were to rejoin, we'd have to join the euro, we have to join Schengen, and those things poll so badly with the British people. The other sort of STDs poll better than some of those things. I sort of think that the Brexiteers have won now. Is that how you feel? Do you feel secure in your victory?
Well, I mean, yeah. The one thing they're not really telling people, like whether it's the SNP trying to make Scotland independent and then join the EU, or the actual rejoiners, sometimes we try to challenge them. The media try to challenge them, say, so what's going to happen with the currency? What's going to happen with the reality of the process? They keep trying not to say it, and because they, for example, again, the SNP and the Remainers, they have a lot of the media behind them, so you don't really see the mainstream media, apart from like Andrew Neil challenging Nicola Sturgeon and other Remainers on what's going to happen after you leave the UK, or whatever, you want to join the EU. If you keep saying that, if we have truly a professional and impartial media, then people will be definitely more informed and well informed in terms of their decisions. And the fact that the political system and the media are treating people as stupid and kids, and then they say that it's usually from the left and Remainers when we hear, well, people aren't informed enough. Firstly, we're talking about the age of 2020, when everybody has access to information. So it's everybody has, for example, with the lockdown and all the stuff, the measures, washing your hand and everything. Everyone knows what you have to do, what you don't have to do, and all that. The rest of it is up to them. They're adults. Let them decide. So that's the problem we have with Remainers.
And were you expecting there to be an effort to return a referendum? So I spoke to quite a few Brexiteers who were, always said that there'll be war for one vote. There's going to be a real struggle to get the vote implemented. But there are others who said they were surprised at just how vicious and just how determined the efforts were. I wonder what you thought about that.
I mean, there are two aspects when it comes to the 2016 referendum. One was the way it was fought from both sides, and then how easy or hard it was going to be. I was not really surprised the way the Remain campaign operated, because it was the same people who ran the Scottish referendum, both the No campaign, the David Cameron team and Osborne and everyone, and the same team who defeated Ed Miliband. So they use the same tactics. So I wasn't surprised when they were going with Project Fear. And that's one thing. But the problem is that they didn't understand that at that time, 2016, things had changed. Project Fear wasn't going to work anymore, especially with that question. And I did experience a couple of really vicious moments where the last day of the referendum, I was actually in central London, because I was mainly campaigning in East London. That was our target seat for Leave. And but I went to Embankment for some reason. I think I was going to meet a friend or something, and I bumped into outside the station. I bumped into the group of Conservatives in. So there was the Remainers of the Tory party, and it's funny because every time you go to, like, there are a couple of stations, Fulham Broadway, South Kensington, and Embankment. Every single time you had Remainers outside. Like, why are you campaigning in your heartland with your posh champagne socialist, spoiled middle class kids? And that was the problem that they had. But then I bumped into them, and they were like, they recognized me, and they said, because they were Tories, they said, "This is the last few hours of your political career and life. We're going to destroy you. You're going to," like, it was really bad. Really vicious, like, and at that moment, because I was really in the middle of, like, the bubble, London. And for a second, I was like, well, this is all I'm seeing right now. We're going to lose. This is the end. Like, they're going to hang me and Boris and Michael Gove. And I went back to East London, and I realized, and Essex, I realized there is such thing called outside of London. London is not the UK. So that was the experience. But then, yeah, I mean, when we won, I thought, that's it. I was one of those that'd be like, there we go, simple. We got the vote. It's going to happen. But then it took us about 52 years to do it.
I think you talked about in one of your other videos, but you had a more recent run-in where you kind of had some guys trying to sort of intimidate you. I think they recognised you. Was that it? Was that in a bar, I think?
Yeah, it was outside a bar. It was the BLM supporters. One of them. That was funny, actually. They've been drunk, so I can't even blame it on alcohol. I don't think so. But no,
these guys just recognised you from YouTube, or?
Yeah, apparently. And so he came and said, this guy, one of his friends were like, oh, that's that right-wing YouTuber. He doesn't like Black Lives. And I was like, what? When did I say that? So it kind of escalated, but we tried to bring it down. And then they just kind of punched me in the chest. So I kind of called the police. And the police actually found the CCTV footage and everything. They said, "Do you want to go to court?" I was like, "Oh no, that's too much effort." So I made my point.
But they didn't. Did they make an arrest, or I guess perhaps not?
They just took in notes, put it in the records. I guess, I don't know.
No, it's surprising. I mean, it's kind of interesting how, certainly over the last few months, I mean, obviously the left has always been obsessed with identity politics, but in the last sort of 3 months, that's going to turbocharge. I mean, everything seems to be about identity. Everything seems to be about race. I mean, do you think that's purely an American import? And is there anything we can just stop that?
Yeah, so I know some people are saying, like, it's definitely just American politics coming here, and some people are saying, no, it's not. It's 50-50. I mean, partly it is, but partly this kind of anger or this kind of identity politics of everything is racist, or it's not just about the race stuff, it's about any other thing that's happening, whether it's, Extinction Rebellion and the environment or other topics. I think the biggest problem is that it's a generational thing where right now with social media and everything, we were talking about this earlier, the access to information and how easy it is with social media, that there are some plus, sides, but also there are some negative points, which is because everyone has a voice, everyone can be loud, everyone is loud, and there's no more intellectual kind of effort for people to actually study things themselves. People don't read anymore. They don't read newspapers. They don't read books. They just get their news from, like, headlines on Instagram or Facebook. So obviously that's why you have these movements like BLM. Just because it's got the words Black Lives Matter, that means that's all you have to. You read it, you either have to be pro or against. There's no substance, and that creates division. That creates a more intellectual division. So if you criticize it, they'll come after you. It is partly American, but it's partly just human.
I mean, look, going back to the last election, I was thinking, because it was almost like there was a coalition of Corbynites and Remainers. It was kind of like an alliance of convenience. I mean, really they hated each other, but obviously the Corbynites wanted to put Corbyn as number 10, and the Remainers realised that the only way they could stop Brexit was to get Corbyn as number 10 and have a second referendum. I mean, were you surprised by just how kind of happy the centre-left were? So the Remainers, generally centre-left, were to ally with the far left, people who praise the IRA and praise Hamas and you've obviously you mentioned being from Iran, appeared on press TV, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that was the reason they lost. The same reason that the Remainers lost in 2016 was because they had this unholy coalition of different groups, and the only thing that united them was during the referendum was the Brexit campaign, the Leave campaign, and during the last election, the Conservatives. So, but it wasn't enough as a factor to unite them all. They still had the division inside. So you had the soft kind of centre-left people like the Blairites, then you had the Corbynites, then you had the actual Remainers, then you had the actual crazy hard left momentum side who are like even more left-wing than Jeremy Corbyn, some of them, like anarchists. So they were going with the mentality of, well, enemy of an enemy is a friend. So like, it's fine. For once, we could all unite, but they didn't actually do it properly. They still had arguments. They still couldn't actually get their act together. Thank God. But it is weird. You're right, because when you have like some soft left-wing liberals working with Corbynistas just because they want to oppose the Tories, there's absolutely like no morality there. Like that, if these people actually cared that hard left is a bad thing, why would you be on the same platform with them? That's the problem.
Yeah, I know. It's like you sort of see. I think it was Keir Starmer in the news last night talking about the Tony Abbott thing. So Tony Abbott being a trade, pointed to one of our trade people, saying how terrible it was and awful it was. And it's sort of 6 months ago, you were campaigning for a guy that about 70 to 80% of British Jews think is an anti-Semite, and now suddenly you're sort of holier than thou, and he said some bad things 15 years ago. I just do they not notice the hypocrisy, or do they just not care?
But this is exactly why. So we had it yesterday, the last couple of days, from the mainstream media, Kay Burley on Sky News and a few others, who kept having like government ministers on TV and asking them about Tony Abbott because of his new trade job, saying, isn't it bad because he's a racist, homophobic, sexist, fascist, Nazi, is literally everything you could find. But these ministers and everybody who was like trying to defend Tony Abbott, they couldn't defend it. They were like, but like you have to literally fight back and hit back and say, Kay Burley, what's this got to do? Firstly, with me, and what's it got to do with the actual trade job? Is he going to be like? Is it going to affect his role? Why are you asking this? What's the actual agenda? What's behind your actual question? Then basically you have to turn it around. No one challenges these people because they always ask the questions. But if the question is ridiculous, I remember people can go on YouTube. There's a couple of clips of Margaret Thatcher when she was interviewed a few times, and when she was asked stupid questions, she literally responded, "Well, that's a stupid question. I'm not going to answer."
I mean, obviously, at the moment, there's kind of ongoing Brexit negotiations, so between us and Brussels, and they seem to be sort of gridlocked over two issues. So, in particular, fishing and industrial support. So, how much we can subsidise our businesses. I mean, are you worried that the UK might fold, that Boris might fold, or are you pretty confident that he'll hold out for a good deal?
Well, definitely not for a good deal. It's not going to happen. I am. The thing is, like with the Boris government, there's some good things like Brexit and everything else, but then some of the other domestic stuff they've been so bad with the U-turns and everything. So they've been weak. So I'm like, well, if I just judge them on Brexit, they should be fine. But what if they like go mental? So like last minute, but they have been very strong on this, and you guys obviously have kind of the Express have been reporting David Frost being very strong on fisheries and everything else. I think the biggest problem is, at this point, both sides have gone too far with the red lines. So the EU can't really fold, and it would be embarrassing. And the UK can't fold either because all the votes that Boris got from the Brexit side will go away. So you're either going to have no deal, which is still unlikely in my head, or a skeleton version of a trade deal, which neither side will be happy with, but at least they've signed something. So like they could go to the press and say, we have an agreement, but it's basically it's a generic trade deal. Some stuff will be like tariff free, but then they're going to spend the next 10, 20 years just keep negotiating. We'll be out, we'll be sovereign, but just negotiating like with TTIP with America or Canada. They're going to keep negotiating because the EU love that shit.
One question I always ask Brexiteers, I'm always really interested in this one, is whether do you think that the EU itself is inherently bad, or is it just bad for Britain? So, to put it another way, would you like the EU to break up? Would you like other countries to leave, or do you not really care about the EU? You just think it wasn't in our national interest to be part of it?
No, no, I wanted Brexit for every country in Europe. For the sake of the unity and peace and trade in Europe, we have to get rid of the EU. Again, just like we were talking about identity politics, like the organization like BLM saying Black Lives Matter. If you're against it, you're against Black Lives. Or feminists, radical feminists saying if you're not feminist, that means you hate women. The EU keeps talking about Europe. So if you oppose the EU, you're against Europe. But it's not true. So when they have this single market, which is not really free trade, they say if you oppose it, you don't like free trade. What? So it's actually the other way around. Their free trade market is not free trade; it's protectionist. Their version of internationalism, it's not really internationalism; it's pseudo nationalism. But we have to basically hope that one day all European countries would leave this bloc and then instead create a free trade zone like NAFTA with Mexico and Canada, America. Each of those three countries could still sign trade deals with other countries as well, an actual free trade zone, and just cooperate. Have your own parliaments, have your democracies, and then just cooperate on whether it's security, defense, whether it's on trade. You don't need unelected bureaucrats to tell you what to do. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah. I mean, do you think if the people running Europe want it to be a country, as in the people in Brussels, that's kind of their end game? They want the United States of Europe as one sovereign state.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of people who say that obviously this was always pre-planned because they're literally the new version of Nazis. They want to take over the Europe. It's not necessarily because they want to take over like some sort of like Bond villain. That's just their vision, and it's always been their vision. They always wanted a United States of Europe. It's just an idiotic vision because they don't understand that Europe is not America. There's a reason that America is the United States of America. And even to be fair, even though it works in America, it's still very divisive because each state is different. But at least they have a common language, common culture. Whereas in Europe, not much similarities between certain countries. Even between Britain and France, we're right next door and we're very different people.
Yeah.
They don't hold the door for you. They don't set up the escalators. But yeah, but they always, and they've never been too open about it. You have some people like Guy Verhofstadt always saying that I'm an open federalist, blah blah blah. But most of the time they've been hiding it behind these the facade of free trade and the European unity. But in reality, yes, if you give an option right now, the people of Europe say, Brussels, if you want, you could create the United States of Europe. They'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, are there any countries you're looking at in particular as kind of, candidates for the next Brexit, countries that might leave next?
Yeah, my view is that the version of the Brexit that we had in this country, I don't see it in any other country, because as in having a referendum or leaving during peacetime. Because
there'll be a crisis will force the country out.
The Brexit happened because Britain, I mean, even in Britain it took decades, but it's because Britain was always different. Not because we're better than Europe. It's just a different mentality, and it was a lot easier. Again, easier, but it took decades to do that during peacetime. There are places where, when the crisis hits, the Eurozone and everything else, it will happen eventually. Nothing lasts forever. Even the Roman Empire didn't last. Then yes, you're going to have certain countries, whether it's Italy, because some of these countries, the opposition parties are getting stronger. The moment they get into power, and then if Eurozone collapses, then it's just about timing, basically. You got some countries like Hungary, you got Italy, you got a few others. Even some countries in the West, I could even see certain places like, certain Scandinavian countries, or even the Netherlands, if the time comes, or France, because Euroscepticism, the opinion polls are getting very close. So if the opposition parties gain to power and the crisis starts, then the moment they leave the Eurozone, because that will be the first thing. You have to leave the Eurozone first, and then the EU. We didn't have to do that because we were in the Eurozone, luckily, and then that's how it starts, and then the domino effect will go around, and the whole thing will be chaotic. And then by the time everybody leaves, Turkey is going to knock on the door. Guys, I'm coming in. and there's no one in.
Nothing left. I mean, do you think he's essentially doomed? At this point, it's beyond reform. It's got so many structural problems. It's just going to collapse. It's a question of when. Or do you think it could kind of hobble along in a damaged form for quite a long time? You're sort of the sick man of Europe, well, the whole sick man of Europe.
Sick man of the world. Yes, it will definitely. Well, it's both. So there's no hope. It's not because there's just a structural problem. It's a vision problem. They're not going to change their mind. But it will still survive for a while in a very damaged way. It's going to be one of these like very dysfunctional and damaged relationships where you know that the couple have to break up, but they go for years and years. This is basically the member states right now.
Hatred building up.
Yeah, it will take some time. It's not going to collapse tomorrow unless some weird things happen. But yeah, it's not going to last. It's because they can't reform it, because they don't want to reform it. That's the thing. It's not that it's too late. Because of the structure or the complex kind of system. It's just that they don't even want to.
Yeah. Well, so Maya, on that note, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, I'll put a link to your YouTube channel in the bottom. The very unlikely event there's anyone who subscribed to me but not subscribed to you, which is unlikely, I think, but maybe someone is. But yeah, no, so thanks a lot. It's been really interesting.
Thank you very much. I'll see you soon.